Today we will talk about dynamics of guilt. We will see where this concept comes from, how it works, what purpose it serves, and figure out how to free ourselves from it. I'm Dr. Matt, and welcome to my channel. So what is actually guilt? It's a cognitive or emotional experience that happens when an individual thinks, has an idea that they have compromised their own moral or behavioral standards, or in some other way violated universal, might be religious, might be cultural standards, and that they are responsible for this violation. It's very interesting then, because you can already see that you might be guilty because someone said so years ago, centuries ago, and it created a social norm, or you might be guilty because you feel it yourself. It's completely different from being responsible, because responsibility means that it is my duty to perform a certain task, but guilt is emotional. Responsibility is not. Responsibility is only cognitive. It's a thought. It's a task that needs to be done by you. But guilt is a feeling behind it which has a certain dynamic, and it's also very interesting because it's based on the following construct. Firstly, you do something wrong. Now here you need to accept that there is a pattern of correct conduct. Maybe it's social, maybe it comes from your parents. Maybe your family members would say you need to pray every day, or maybe they would say you need to behave a certain way. So there's a notion of behaving right and behaving wrong, or behaving properly and being nasty, going against the rules, and so on. Even in English, there's a phrase which says behave yourself, which is very interesting because you cannot truly not behave yourself. Behaving yourself, which is your selfing, is execution of oneself. So you always behave in a certain way, but when we say behave yourself, especially to a kid, what we truly mean is behave according to certain rules which I preach or which I repeat after what I was told by my parents, and this is how the universal model works. It doesn't mean that this universal model is all right, or that it's effective, or that it's okay, or that it's objective. It's simply how the norm functions, and because people, when they tend to repeat the behaviors of others, they also objectify these behaviors into social norms, and they figure out if this is what everyone does, then it must be normal. So firstly, you do something, you consider it to be wrong, and then you draw a conclusion, which is already on personality level, that because you did something wrong, then you must be a bad person. And because you're a bad person, then you should pay for it. You should be punished. Because of this Mesopotamian kind of rule, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, because you did something bad, then you need to be punished, which means equal suffering needs to be delivered. And it's interesting because even if we're not punished, of course we can be punished by law, we can go to prisons, we can be punished socially, ostracized socially, you can get hatred on Facebook, you can get negative press, you can get bad comments on internet, and so on and so on. But we're talking about a different notion here, about you punishing yourself. Because when someone says, I'm guilty, therefore I'm a bad person, therefore I should be punished, they need to figure out a way to punish themselves. So they become a punisher for themselves. And how do they do it? For instance, they enter toxic relationships. And this is very interesting because imagine there's a guy who betrayed on his girlfriend in a previous relationship. He made a mistake, but he still carries guilt. So he enters a new relationship, and now unconsciously he agrees with certain behaviors of his girlfriend. For instance, she's betraying on him, and he knows about this, but he will not move his finger, he will not express what he truly feels, he will not stop this behavior because he thinks he should be punished, he thinks he deserves this. The same story might be with someone who in the past, say, cheated financially. Now they are underpaid and their boss abuses their situation, their lack of self-esteem, which is not really lack of self-esteem, but rather the concept, I deserve not to make enough money because I did something wrong and therefore I should be punished. A person might tolerate bullying, even though they know it's wrong, but they say, I deserve this. People can go into self-harm, especially with teenagers. It would be popular in certain social groups to cut themselves or scar themselves here. Sometimes people produce self-harming behaviors by becoming obese, by eating too much. Sometimes people would project and blame the victim for something or blame themselves. They can suppress these feelings and try to forget about what they went through in the past, and now project what they suppressed onto others unconsciously, and so on. So as you can see, it's a complex yet fascinating dynamic where we move from the notion of bad behaviors, which is questionable in itself. Obviously, we do understand that legal systems have been created and cultural behaviors and habits have been normalized in order for people to be able to follow a certain routine, to follow a scheme and proper conduct so that everything functions properly. We also do realize the negative aspect to it, which is lack of self-expression. Say, I don't want to do what my parents are telling me to do, then should I have guilt because of this? Or I put different clothes that people are used to in a certain culture, and I'm frowned upon, so should I feel guilty, and so on. So all this, if I don't stop this, will lead to me becoming a person who auto-executes harm in a verbal, non-verbal way on themselves and punishes themselves thinking, I deserve that. That's why we need to free ourselves from it. So there's an exercise for you. Make a list of bad things that you did in your life. They don't have to be objectively bad, because honestly it's very hard to actually define what objectively bad means, but make a list, subjective list of bad things you did, and ask yourself a question to each concept. How can you make up for it? And you negotiate with yourself. Sometimes maybe you said something bad to a different person. Maybe you can call them. Maybe you stole something from a shop. Maybe you can go to the shop and bring it back and apologize. Actually, I had a very interesting idea once, and we were doing this exercise in one of my seminars, and there's this guy who, they make the list, and there's a guy who says, I stole a shirt from a shop. That was many years ago. How will you make up for it? I ask. And he says, well, I go to a shop and bring money back. So he goes to a shop the next day, and it was all during the seminar, and he comes back and he's sort of unhappy. I go, what happened? He says, listen, I went to the store and they were quite surprised. I talked to the manager and he says, sir, but it was a couple of years ago. Actually, I cannot even talk to my bookkeeper about this. I'm really sorry you did that, and it was not necessary for you to come and apologize. And then that's it, right? And he comes back, he says, I couldn't make up for it. And I go, wrong, you did make up for it. Just the way and the execution was not accepted by the others, but this is not a problem of yours. This is how they react. Your idea is to show eagerness and openness to square up, to balance energies out. And once you negotiate with yourself how you can make up for it, which is sometimes going to be a completely different apology on completely different concept that what originally caused the guilt. Say you cheated on someone, but you don't have contact with them. So how are you going to make up for them? By calling them. You cannot do this, right? It's impossible. But what you can do, for instance, maybe an idea that you will negotiate with yourself will be to do some charity work. Negotiate with yourself. And once you do this, and once you negotiate it, ask yourself a testing question. Once I do this, once I perform this making up for it task, am I going to be free? And if you don't feel anything on the inside that is blaming you, that's it, you're done. Perform the tasks, make up for them, and you are free of guilt. And this is how it should work. We use definitely too much guilt, cultural guilt, religious guilt, sexual guilt, emotional guilt when we talk to others and when we communicate with them, because it's a tool to manipulate and to control people. It is not necessary to be guilty. It is necessary to be responsible, that's for sure. But the responsibility is not guilt. You're not guilty, but you are responsible for certain things that are inside your control. So, hope you enjoyed it. and it has value for you. If it does, you can always share this video with someone who can benefit from it. Subscribe to my channel to be updated with all the information that I post here, and visit my blog to get more information on mixed martial arts. Thank you very much, and see you next time.